Today's special guest is Sue Daley, and she comes all the way from Australia to show her method of English paper piecing. So welcome, Sue.
Thanks, Cindy. Great to be here.
So glad you're here to show us this method. I love how you do your hexagons.
So I'm going to start with hexagons. Hexagons are the most popular shape we have, and I'm not sure whether that's because people don't realise there's so many other shapes around, but hexagons are the easiest. So if you're going to start, it's a good thing to start with hexagons. Firstly, though, I'm going to work through some of my tools and notions that I work with. I don't work with a lot of things, but it's important to have the right things. So first of all, we have pre-cut paper shapes, so they're already cut out, and they'll all be exactly the same size, so you don't have any mistakes. And for me, I don't want to cut out paper. I just want to sew. So these papers have a coating on both sides. So with working with my method with the glue pen, it makes it easier to pull the fabric off the paper.
And these are from Busy.
Patchwork with Busy Fingers. That's my business for all my patterns and all my notions that I do. Then we have a template. This is an acrylic template, and as you can see, it has a seam allowance built in. So this is for cutting your fabric. So we rotary cut around this. It's a dual purpose template, so you can actually do traditional hand piecing, or you can actually cut your pieces out and sew on your machine with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we go to the needles. It's really important to work with a fine needle. I use a Milliner's 11. It's also a bit from the Busy Fingers range. It's a long, fine needle, as you can see there. But this needle has a bigger eye than a normal Milliner's needle, so it's much easier.
Which is helpful.
Yeah.
Threading
for people
it.
to thread. And the thing is, if you can't see the eye, just hold it over something white and it'll definitely be there for you. Thread is really, really important. Traditionally with patchwork, you're working with cotton thread, cotton fabric. But with English piecing, if you're working with cotton thread and you're dragging that thread constantly over the top of the card, it will shred it. And so therefore, it will fall apart more quickly than you'd like it to. So this thread is a polyester thread. These are little bobbins. This is called a super bob. It has 36 different colours. However, you can buy it on a bigger reel. And this thread is really fine, so it works beautifully with our fine needles. And it is, you can blend it. Like, you don't have to colour match everything exactly. So that's fun if you don't have to do that.
A little polyester does well with English paper piecing.
Yeah. The rotating mat is one of my favourite things.
I love your mats. These are Sue's own creation.
Yeah.
And pink.
And they're pink.
You have pink.
Busy Fingers pink. This is the very first original, or the first pink mat. I did used to do them in green, but this is the very first one, so you can see it's a very well loved. But it turns when you're cutting, so you don't have to cut under your armpit or dance around the table. You can just turn it and cut. And the way I find
it's a self-healing mat.
So I always just turn with my thumb on the edge, and that's easier to turn like that. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get used to, but once you get used to it, you love it. I call it a necessity now. It used to be a luxury item, but I think it's a necessity now. And it's very versatile for many other things. Now this is the magic pen. This glue pen has revolutionised this technique. So coupled with all the things that I've put with it, it's made it much easier, much more user-friendly, and also this pen cuts my time down by about 75%. We used to tack through the paper and with thread, and then we'd have to unpick it. So this, when you see this,
essential tool.
It's brilliant. It is. It really is. So they're all my little notions that I use. So I'm going to start showing you how to do it.
Okay, let's get started.
Okay, so we start with a template and some fabric. Now, with the template, you can cut through many layers of fabric depending on how sharp your rotary cutter is. So you'll soon find out if it's sharp or not. So I'm just going to cut through 4 layers at a time here. Pop your template on the top, and I'm just going to, with my rotary cutter,
work right around it.
And this mat is really stable, so I'm actually able to cut out on my lap sometimes in front of the television set, if you're clever and you don't cut your leg. Okay, so there we have 4 cut really quickly. Then we're going to take a paper.
And you said it's double-sided.
It's coated on both sides, so our papers weren't always like that. But since I discovered the glue pen and introduced it to the market, we decided we would have our papers made with a coating on both sides, so it's much easier to release the paper from the card.
Good idea.
So you're just going to put your paper on top of your fabric, and you're going to run your glue pen down the side on the paper. Now don't be tempted to glue right to the edge, and don't be tempted to glue right on that fabric there. And the reason for that is if you glue right on the very edge there, when we go to sew it together, it's going to be difficult and you won't love it.
The glue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to glue along the edge, but if you can see there, I've glued just in from the edge a little. And then we're just going to fold that over, turn it. So your cutting mat also serves as a good surface for your gluing as well. Now I'm going to glue along the edge there. I just put a little tiny bit on my fabric there just to hold your corners in nice and tight.
And that works up so quickly,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
So all the time, just remember, keep it away from that edge because that's really important. And a little bit of glue there and a little bit of glue on that last bit of fabric there. And then you have the perfect hexagon.
That is perfect.
Okay.
So you just do your...
Yeah. So what we're going
all
to
of
do
them like
next,
that.
we're going to do all of those. So I've prepared some here. Okay. So what we're going to do is sew a little flower together. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take the center one and one of the outside ones here. So I'll take my needle. And what you need to do is thread your needle and just put a knot in the end of your thread. Just any sort of knot. We're going to take two pieces, two hexagons, and we're going to put them right sides together. And I'm going to run my needle up in between the card and the fabric. So I lose my knot right up into that seam allowance, and it just holds it there while I start my stitching. Now I do a thing called a knicker knot, and it is a knot that you start with it and you finish with it just before you cut your thread. You don't have to do it every stitch, but a lot of people never start and finish their English piecing properly, so it tends to come apart at the beginning or the end. So I'm going to take a stitch, one stitch at the beginning there, and then I'm going to come in for another stitch. So we have now one thread at the front, and we have two threads coming out of the eye of the needle at the back. We're going to take the one at the front and we're going to wrap it underneath and take it to the left and to the back. We're going to take the two threads at the back, we're going to take it, bring it forward and bring it underneath to the right and to the back. So it's left, right, opposite directions. And when you pull it, you'll have a little knot like that, like a figure 8. If you don't have that knot, then means you've wrapped it in the same direction.
Okay.
So pull that nice and tight, so we're ready to start stitching.
And that really secures that end.
That's right. And then when you get to the very end, not the end of this row, but when you get to the very end of your work, when you need to cut your thread, you'll do a knicker knot and then you'll cut your thread. So we're going to stitch, and we're going to stitch from the back to the front, and we're going to stitch straight across. The shortest distance from here to here is straight. Don't be tempted to stitch on an angle that way.
Because your threads will show.
Yeah.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
It doesn't look so pretty.
No. So you're going to stitch, and you'll do your stitches about a 1/16 or about 1.5 millimeters, depends which country you live in. And don't be tempted. Now this is the thing that people do. I say take a small bite of fabric either side, but don't be tempted just to pick up one thread and one thread. What that does is it's like drawn thread work, and it'll pull the thread from your fabric. When you open it up, you'll see through your seam. So you need to really pick up 2 threads either side. Just go a little deeper. And it just runs across the top of your card. Sometimes you will stitch through your card. We all do it.
And I think that's why, again, you use polyester, because it's a stronger thread.
Yeah, that's correct.
And your cotton,
Yeah.
it couldn't handle the
That's right.
stress of the paper.
That's right. It'll just shred the cotton and it weakens really quickly. So we're just going to stitch across the top there. So if you have a look, I don't know whether you can see that there, but you can see the distance between my thread and my needle. That's about the distance between your stitches.
Just little tiny stitches.
Yeah, they don't need to be on top of each other. But make sure too that you pull your thread firmly. Don't pull it so hard that you break it, but just firmly, because if you leave them loose, again, you'll see those stitches on the right side, and that was one of the things that I really wanted to master with this technique. Now I get to the end and I do 2 stitches. And because our hexagons aren't too big, you can see there that there's no stitches showing on the front side, because that was my biggest pet hate, was that. But because these aren't too big, these hexagons, these are 3/4 inch, I can just travel my thread in behind up to this top one here, and then I can add my next one. And I would just do 2 stitches again at the beginning. So we just come in for 2 stitches there, and then I travel right back down.
Back down to the center.
To the middle, yeah. And just make sure that you're pulling your thread firmly.
And you work so quickly at this. I can tell you've been doing it a long time.
You have to work quick when you work by hand. No, I think the thing is with hand piecing, it's really come into its own in the last couple of years worldwide. And I think that some people are a little bit afraid that it's instead of machine piecing, but it's not. It's as well as. So if you're a machine piecer and you really love to machine piece, there are times in your life where you just want to sit quietly and enjoy the journey. And I always say that you need to enjoy the journey. So I've got to the end of that row. I've done 2 stitches right there at that very point.
And that's your Y seam right there.
So this is a real easy way to do Y seam. So what I'm going to do is just open that back up, and I'm going to refold everything back and fold this one in half. Don't be scared to fold your papers here. Then I'm going to just do 2 stitches here.
To just reinforce that.
Because it's a Y seam, I've done 2 at the end and then 2 at the beginning, and it just keeps that Y seaming nice and tight for you, so you don't get any gaps in there. And we'll come back along to the edge again, and we'll do that procedure exactly the same as what I just did. We'll travel our thread up the back and go all the way around to the last one, travel our thread up the back, and then you'll do 3 seams on that last. When you insert that last hexagon, you will do 3 seams in the one time. So when you open that up, perfect Y seam.
Beautiful.
For those people who struggle or shy away from doing Y seams, this is just the perfect way to do it, and you can't make a mistake. It's just so easy.
Yeah, make it so easy.
What I've got here is one I've finished. So we have a little flower. Okay.
So when do you take your papers out?
So I wouldn't take my papers out until I'm ready, depending on what I'm doing with it. If I was to applique that on here,
so like on this quill.
Yep. If we pull that over, this is a little flower. It's the same size actually. This one looks a lot bigger because of the colour, I think. This, if I was going to applique that on there, I would leave my paper in until I'm ready to applique it. Because if you go ahead and take all your papers out, then your edges will come undone, and then it's not as easy to applique it down. So I would press it both sides. Now, then all you've got to do is come in, flick
the edges
back, and then you can just take your paper out. And you can see that, you probably can't see there, but they're a little bit, you can see where the needle's gone down the edge of the paper. But this can be reused again because it's still in great shape. It hasn't got any holes in it, and it's still in great shape. Even though this was the one we bent in half, you can still reuse it. When they get a bit soft, then you need to throw them out. But I would take my papers out of that, and then I would put some applique glue on behind, and I would place it on there, press it, and then I could do an applique stitch around the outside edge. However, if you were going to do a whole quilt, like a grandma's flower garden, then you would join them all together. And so long as you have surrounded the papers with more paper, you can start taking it from the middle. If you leave it all in, what happens is it gets really, really heavy, and it's hard to work with. So you need to start taking them out, and of course then you can start reusing them as well. And on this one, you'll see we just put it on the border.
That's a fantastic border.
Put that on there, and you know, they were just sewn edge to edge around, and it just adds a really
makes it very interesting border if you've got a plain border to add hexagons.
Yeah.
Show us the handle on that.
Okay, so here's a little bag.
That's another great way to
embellish the front, and then here
it's a double.
Yeah, just double-sided, and you can actually put Peltex in here instead of the paper. Just use it exactly the same as the paper.
Okay. All right. However, give it stiffness that's going to stay in.
Yeah, and you just leave it in there, but you will have to cut those yourself.
And again, the sides are all hexies.
And these are quilt-as-you-go hexagons. The sides are made up.
Well, everyone's crazy about hexagons.
They are.
And you just make it an easy method for anyone to be able to do it. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been great being here. I look forward to it again sometime.
Thank you.